Picture this. One man, 24 hours. The entire global financial system brought to its knees. We're talking about George Soros, an absolute legend who torpedoed the British pound and crushed the Bank of England, like it was nothing more than a game of Monopoly. This wasn't just unprecedented, this was financial warfare on a scale nobody had ever witnessed. That's why Soros walked away with the ultimate power title, the man who broke the Bank of England. But here's the kicker, that was just his warm-up act. His sphere of influence didn't stop at Wall Street or the City of London. From the bustling markets of Asia to the frozen tundra of Russia, from the corridors of Brussels to Capitol Hill, Soros literally upended the entire world's political and economic order. Even today, conspiracy theories swirl that he orchestrated the recent federal arrest warrant against Indian billionaire Gautam Adani. So, here's the billion-dollar question that keeps everyone up at night. How does a kid who literally had to hide from the Nazis and beg for scraps become so insanely powerful that he has simultaneously feared and revered across the globe? How did this survivor transform unimaginable trauma into unstoppable force, becoming one of history's most polarizing enigmas? And everybody's dying to know what's George Soros's actual net worth. Could he secretly be the richest person on the planet? Today, we're peeling back the layers on the shadowy, controversial, and downright explosive chapters of George Soros's life that transformed him into a financial powerhouse and political lightning rod. Listen up, folks. George Soros is that name, the one whispered in hushed tones in every major financial scandal and geopolitical controversy across the planet. Depending on who you ask, he is either a visionary philanthropist trying to save democracy or a ruthless puppet master orchestrating chaos for profit. His allies swear he's building a better tomorrow. His adversaries insist he's a master manipulator who'd gladly bankrupt nations to pad his portfolio. But what kind of supernatural power does this guy wield that allows him to go toe-to-toe with sovereign nations and their central banks? Because demolishing the British pound was merely Act 1, what followed was a greatest hits album of economic destruction, the Asian financial crisis, Russia's economic meltdown, tremors through Japan's economy. Soros has essentially terrorized some of the world's most formidable economic superpowers. The real mystery, how the hell did all of this begin? Alright, buckle up. This story kicks off 94 years ago in Budapest, Hungary. Smack in the middle of World War II when the entire planet was consumed by the most devastating conflict in human history. Born into this nightmare was a child named Georgi Schwartz, who would later become George Soros. During the Nazi occupation, George and his family faced a single, brutal objective: survive. Born into a Jewish family during the Holocaust meant death could come knocking any second. But George's father? Absolute genius? He devised a radical survival playbook that would save their lives and shape George's entire worldview. His strategy was simple but terrifying. If we want to live, we need to erase who we really are. Young George started calling his own mother Aunt. The family adopted Christian identities, fake names, forged documents, whatever it took to disappear into plain sight and dodge the Nazi death machine. This traumatic experience planted something profound in George's psyche. The belief that life is fundamentally one giant high-stakes adventure where courage, quick thinking, and adaptability separate survivors from victims. This mindset became the bedrock of his later appetite for astronomical financial risk. After miraculously escaping Hungary's Nazi hell, George set his sights on London, hungry to reinvent himself and make his mark. Getting accepted to the London School of Economics became his launching pad. There, he encountered the man who'd change everything, philosopher Karl Popper. Popper's theory of reflexivity absolutely blew George's mind and became his secret weapon. Here's the Cliff Notes version. Traditional economics says markets operate on rational supply and demand. Popper said, bullshit. Markets are driven by human perception, biases, and feedback loops. Investors don't just respond to reality, they create reality through their collective beliefs and actions, which then influences actual market outcomes in a perpetual cycle. George took this philosophical framework and weaponized it in his trading strategies, and it would eventually trigger financial earthquakes felt around the world. His eureka moment was realizing that if he could decode market psychology and investor behavior patterns, he could make absolutely obscene amounts of money. That insight separated him from every other trader on the planet. Fast forward a few years. It's 1970, and George is ready to put Karl Popper's theories to the ultimate test. He launches the Quantum Fund, and this wasn't your grandfather's conservative investment vehicle. Quick primer for those unfamiliar. A hedge fund pools capital from high-net-worth investors and accredited institutions, then deploys sophisticated, often aggressive strategies to maximize returns. These aren't your boring index funds. We're talking derivatives, leverage, short positions, arbitrage, the whole 9 yards. Quantum Fund was built differently from the ground up. George applied Popper's theory of reflexivity as his North Star, making contrarian bets that seemed absolutely insane to conventional wisdom. His philosophy? Take massive, calculated risks where others saw only danger. If he was right, the payoffs would be astronomical. If he was wrong, well, let's just say he didn't dwell on that possibility. And here's the crazy part. He was right. A lot. quantum fund exploded into one of the world's largest and most successful hedge funds, consistently delivering mind-blowing returns that made traditional fund managers look like they were playing with monopoly money. George Soros became synonymous with audacious, unconventional financial genius. He proved that high risk, high reward wasn't just Wall Street mythology, it was his formula for domination, and the wildest chapters were still ahead. September 16, 1992. This date lives in infamy as George Soros's most legendary and notorious financial coup. Here's the setup. Britain was part of the European Exchange Rate Mechanism, ERM, which essentially locked the British pound to other European currencies at fixed rates. The system's purpose was noble enough to maintain currency stability across Europe and facilitate economic integration, but it had a fatal flaw. If the pound started tanking, the Bank of England would be forced to burn through its foreign currency reserves to prop it up artificially. Soros, with his trademark analytical brilliance, spotted the vulnerability immediately. The pound was fundamentally overvalued. Britain's economy couldn't sustain the currency at its mandated ERM rate. The Bank of England was essentially playing an unwinnable game of financial chicken, hemorrhaging reserves to maintain an illusion. George thought, if I bet against the pound and I'm right, I'll make a fortune when reality catches up. Let me break down short selling for the uninitiated, because this is crucial to understanding Soros's genius. Short selling is essentially betting against an asset. Here's how it works. You borrow shares of stock, or in this case, currency that you don't own. Immediately sell them at today's price, then wait. If the price drops like you predicted, you buy them back at the lower price and return them to whoever you borrowed from. Your profit is the difference. It's higher risk, high reward speculation at its finest. This wasn't just risky, this was financial kamikaze. No rational trader would bet the farm against the central bank of a G7 economy. But Soros, he saw opportunity where others saw suicide. For days, he meticulously studied currency flows, interest rate dynamics, and political pressures. Then, on September 16, 1992, he pulled the trigger on history's most audacious trade, a $10 billion short position against the British pound. Let that sink in. $10 billion, the markets absolutely freaked. Word spread like wildfire that Soros was going nuclear on sterling. Other traders, knowing his track record, piled on. The pound went into freefall. The Bank of England panicked. They dumped billions trying to buy pounds and prop up the price. They jacked interest rates to eye-watering levels to attract capital. Nothing worked. Soros's position was a financial black hole, swallowing everything they threw at it. Britain faced an impossible choice. Keep burning reserves, defending an indefensible currency position, or admit defeat and abandon the ERM altogether, a humiliation of historic proportions. Finally, Finance Minister Norman Lamont stood before the cameras and essentially said, "We're out." Britain withdrew from the ERM. The pound collapsed. George Soros had just brought the Bank of England to its knees. In a single day, he pocketed approximately $1 billion in profit. $1 billion in one day. The financial world lost its collective mind. Soros's name echoed through every trading floor on Earth. Black Wednesday proved that even the mightiest central banks were vulnerable to a sufficiently brilliant, sufficiently bold speculator. Politicians and media crucified him. They called it economic terrorism, unethical profiteering, manipulation. Accusations flew that he'd deliberately destabilized an allied nation's economy for personal gain. And just like that, controversy became George Soros's permanent shadow. After Black Wednesday, every move Soros made was scrutinized like a hawk. His theory of reflexivity and uncanny ability to read market psychology had established a new paradigm in global finance. But he wasn't done, not even close. The Asian tigers, Thailand, Malaysia, South Korea, Indonesia, were experiencing explosive economic growth. Foreign capital flooded in. These economies looked invincible. Soros saw something different. He identified structural weaknesses. These economies were dangerously over-averaged, dependent on hot foreign capital that could evaporate overnight, maintaining artificially pegged currencies they couldn't sustain. His primary target, Thailand's baht, Soros launched massive short positions against the baht, betting it would collapse under its own contradictions. Thailand's central bank fought back desperately, burning reserves to defend the peg. They never stood a chance. The baht crashed. Thailand's economy imploded. Panic spread like a contagion across Southeast Asia. Malaysia, Indonesia, South Korea, dominoes falling in sequence. The Asian financial crisis had arrived, and Soros's fingerprints were all over it. He walked away with billions. Asian leaders vilified him. Malaysia's Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad called him an economic war criminal. Accusations of neocolonialism and financial imperialism flew. Soros's response? Essentially, don't hate the player, hate the game. I identified weaknesses in your systems and capitalized. That's capitalism. His reputation as a market predator was now cemented globally. The late 90s brought another crisis, another target, Russia. Post-Soviet Russia was a mess, plummeting oil prices, rampant corruption, economic instability. The ruble was vulnerable. Soros predictably went in for the kill. He took positions against the ruble, betting on collapse. Russia's government threw everything at defending their currency. It didn't matter. The fundamentals were too weak. The ruble crashed. Russia's economy spiraled into chaos. Once again, Soros profited handsomely from a nation's misery. Fast forward to 2013-14. People assumed maybe Soros had mellowed with age. Wrong. Japan was battling deflation, falling prices that strangle economic growth. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe launched Abenomics, an aggressive monetary stimulus program designed to weaken the yen and boost inflation. Soros analyzed the policy and concluded the yen would drop significantly. He took massive positions betting against it. He was right. Again, pocketed roughly $1 billion. Again, the man simply doesn't miss. Here's where the story gets complicated, because George Soros isn't just a market predator. In 1979, he founded the Open Society Foundation's OSF, which has become one of the world's largest philanthropic networks. Its mission: promote democracy, human rights, freedom of expression, and social justice globally. Soros has poured billions in debt, supporting democratic movements in authoritarian countries, funding universities and educational initiatives fighting racial discrimination, promoting criminal justice reform, supporting refugees and immigrants. In 2017 alone, he transferred $18 billion to OSF, one of the largest charitable donations in history. Because of his philanthropy, Soros's current net worth sits around $6.5 billion, a fraction of the $25+ billion he once controlled. But this is a massive but OSF is wildly controversial. Critics, particularly on the political right, accuse Soros of using philanthropy as a Trojan horse for advancing a globalist, progressive political agenda. They claim he funds organizations that destabilize governments, promote open borders, undermine national sovereignty, and push leftist ideology. Hungary and Russia have effectively banned OSF operations, accusing the foundation of interfering in domestic politics. Defenders argue OSF genuinely supports democracy and human rights in places where they're under attack. They point to OSF's work supporting dissidents, independent media, and civil society in authoritarian regimes. The truth, probably somewhere in the murky middle. Soros isn't just a financial titan, he's a major political player, particularly in Western democracies. Brexit: Soros vocally opposed Britain leaving the EU, funding campaigns for a second referendum. Critics said he was protecting his European investments. Supporters said he genuinely believed in European unity. American politics: Soros is one of the Democratic Party's biggest donors, contributing hundreds of millions to progressive causes and candidates. He's supported campaign finance reform, criminal justice reform, immigration reform, climate change initiatives, gun control measures. Conservatives view him as public enemy number one, the puppet master funding the progressive movement, funding district attorney races to install town crime prosecutors, bankrolling Antifa unproven, orchestrating George Floyd protests, conspiracy theory, and generally trying to destroy traditional American values. Progressives see him as a heroic philanthropist fighting for social justice. The conspiracy theories about Soros are legion, some credible, many absurd, all reflecting his status as a lightning rod in our polarized political landscape. So what's the verdict on George Soros? Is he a financial genius who simply played by the rules better than anyone else? A ruthless speculator who profited from national suffering? A visionary philanthropist fighting for democracy and human rights? A shadowy manipulator pushing a globalist agenda? The answer depends entirely on your worldview, political leanings, and economic philosophy. What's undeniable: George Soros is one of the most influential, controversial, and polarizing figures of the modern era. He's transformed how we think about currency markets, demonstrated the power of reflexivity in economics, proved that individuals can challenge sovereign nations, and reshaped political philanthropy. His story is a Rorschach test. What you see reveals more about you than about him. And that, folks, is what makes the George Soros saga so endlessly fascinating. Now that's the truth, so subscribe channel, like the video. For now we will meet in next.